PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. I'd like to do a recap of the whole of the World Championship match between Gukesh, Dommaraju and Liren. So I'm going to be looking at all 14 games, but just very briefly. I think it's only by looking at all of the games with hindsight, which is a beautiful thing, that we can see the kind of rhythms and the dynamics of the match, of the games, and I think you can see the psychology of between the players very well. So here we go. Let's crack on. Game one. So e4 from Gukesh, and Ding played the French. That was our first little surprise. I mean, he has played it before, but certainly not his main weapon. And we got this really sharp position where Gukesh seemed to be very well prepared. So we had this locked centre, both players, attacking, Ding on the queen side, Gukesh on the king side. But pretty quickly, Ding found his feet and I think stabilised things on the queen side and, established this nice knight on c4. And here is the first moment where I think Gukesh showed his nerves in the match. He played knight takes d4. Now, with that, it's clear that he still wanted to attack somehow on the king side. It would have been better to play more solidly with bishop takes d4. That bishop is very well protected. It's going to be less easy to get in f5, but the position is round about equal. But knight takes d4 was just a bit too eager. And Ding found this really nice plan to attack the pawn here. I mean, Gukesh could have improved. He wasn't lost at this point, but basically Ding took control and managed to infiltrate. And yeah, there were improvements later on for Gukesh, but by this stage, Ding was in full flow and he won a really good game. Only thing was, Ding did use up a lot of time sort of negotiating his way through the opening, but, well, Gukesh caught up later on. But, yeah, Ding showed that all these fears we had that he was going to get blown away in the match as a whole were unfounded, and Ding was very concentrated, and Gukesh, as I said, was just a bit too eager and showed his nerves. Very understandable, but he showed his nerves in that first game. So 1 up for Ding after one game. Then we had game 2. So Ding playing white, gioco piano, and out of the opening, so a very quiet opening, as one would expect from a gioco piano. But there's no doubt that Ding was better here, and a really good outcome from the opening, because you can see that this pawn is the difference between the two positions. So otherwise it's pretty symmetrical, but that pawn is slightly weak. If that is protected by this pawn, then the A file opens, and there are other consequences like potentially a knight landing on d5. So what white is trying to do here is stabilise the centre and eventually attack that pawn by playing the knight to d3. Now, it's difficult to arrange that because there are tactics on the c file. You have to be very careful here. But, a lot of players, Carlsen included, thought that this was an excellent opportunity for Ding to squeeze here and really put the pressure on Gukesh. So here, the kind of obvious move is to play f3, perhaps bring the king into the centre, and attempt to get in knight d3. But there's also another plan, potentially to attack with b4 and open up the b file. But instead, Ding, after just a few moves, he basically decided to repeat the position. He said afterwards, my idea was to just play very carefully, and he was fine with a draw. But that certainly let Gukesh off the hook, because this could have been quite unpleasant for black. With hindsight, we can say Ding should have pressed in this game, and as we're going to see, that followed a pattern in subsequent games. However, 1.5-1/2 after 2 games, certainly not bad for Ding. And, well, game 3 was very interesting. Gukesh played a very sharp line of the Queen's Gambit. Very complicated line that reached an endgame very quickly, but, you know, with a slightly damaged pawn structure and this bishop coming down here. A really sharp position. And again, we had the situation where Gukesh was playing quite quickly. Clearly, this was part of his preparation. Ding was using up a lot of time to feel his way through. And actually, Ding played extremely well. And at this point, if Ding, for example, had played bishop e7, then he would have had a good position. I mean, certainly White doesn't want to protect that pawn with f4, giving away those squares. If the bishop is pushed back, then Black is very comfortable here. You know, the rook controls the open file. There's potential weakness here. Black is very solid. These pawns later on could look rather ugly. But Ding miscalculated. He played rook h5. And after this, the bishop was in trouble. And I think this shows one of Gukesh's great qualities. He is a superb calculator. Because although this at first glance looks absolutely fine for Black, Ding certainly thought so, there is a really unusual move here that Gukesh had seen well in advance and Ding had overlooked. Knight e2, a strange backward move. You know, White's pieces look terrible, blocking each other, but this wins material. Brilliant calculation from Gukesh to foresee this so many moves in advance, because, you know, you might get to a position like this and think, well, Black is absolutely fine, but this wins material. So the basic problem is, if knight takes knight, bishop takes, the bishop is attacked, the rook is attacked. White wins material. So Ding had to play knight takes, but in this position, White is a piece up. Although Ding has 2 pawns for it, in fact, White is so solid that Gukesh really negotiated this one very, very well. I mean, the only thing I would say is that Ding kind of wallowed in this position. You know, if he'd had a bit more grit, maybe he would have had a chance to hold this. But Gukesh's technique was excellent. And yeah, he put this one away very well indeed. So that was the final position where Ding kind of lost on time and collapsed all at the same time. But yeah, that's a winning move for White. So excellent game from Gukesh. Basically, he played for a complex position and Ding cracked. And so, you know, he gambled and it paid off. So after 3 games, the scores even, 1.5 all. Game 4. Well, Ding played very calmly in the opening with this b3. I mean, basically he's playing with the black pieces, but with colours reversed. I mean, this is a very, very modest opening. But he did get a position which potentially had something. So he's managed to establish this knight on d4. But Gukesh played very sensibly indeed with b6 and wants to push this knight out of the way. I mean, some people were saying afterwards, well, Ding could have perhaps tried something here with bishop a6. I think Nakamura thought that this was still a reasonable chance for White to play. I disagree. I think if you play with f4, I think this is very risky. This can go very badly wrong. So actually, I think in this case, Ding was correct in just simplifying the position And yeah, he coasted towards a draw basically after this. I mean, it's clear this is going to peter out. But I thought what was interesting was that even, much later on when we got to the heavy piece endgame, around about here, Gukesh, I mean, this is a drawn position. 4 against 4 with queen and rook each. Gukesh, I could have just played something like g6, and pretty sure that Ding would have just simplified like this and with a draw. But it's interesting that Gukesh wanted to keep tension in the position. So this is common to so many games in this match, where Ding very happy just to cut towards a draw, Gukesh wanting to just play on and test his opponent. And fair play to Gukesh for doing that. In this game, it didn't make any difference. In fact, they did simplify after this. And once the queens are exchanged, then there really is not absolutely nothing going on. And it was a draw. But interesting to see, Gukesh just wanting to test Ding the whole time. So 2-2 after 4 games. Gukesh played white in the next one. Yeah, so once again, we saw Ding playing the French. He said after the match that actually it wasn't his intention to play the French again. He'd intended reverting to e5, but he thought, well, Gukesh and his team must have spent so much time preparing e4, e5, that they thought, well, let's risk the French again. And it paid off, because in this position, Gukesh went for the exchange variation and was presumably looking for a long game, perhaps a slight advantage. But in fact, Ding negotiated the opening very well, and they reached this endgame, and excellent play from Ding to push with g5. And at this point, well, Gukesh is sort of punting with g4. Not a beautiful move, I have to say. And at this point, Ding, looked to have the better chances, actually. Later on, again, it was a little bit surprising that, they've reached this position. There's only one player can be better here, and that's Ding with black. Got this pawn on d3. But somehow he simplified too quickly. So he played knight c4. Even here, there's a chance to play on with rook c8. But by the time they get to this position, it's absolutely clear that it's going to be a draw, because the rooks are exchanged, and that's that. So Ding, very happy just to cut to a drawn position. But actually, if we go back, let's say here, he could have pressed. Now, would he have won this? Hard to say, but you have to give your opponent a chance to go wrong. So, for example, knight a4, instead of exchanging knights, keeps more tension in the position. And then white has to decide, do you play, how do you deal with this attack? So do you play rook b1, but then f6, tries to open things up and gets the rook down here? Or do you allow black to take here, but then it becomes complicated? The knight cuts back. I mean, maybe white is okay here, but there's tension in that position. I mean, there are other ways for black to play as well after this. You could play the knight back to a4, and, again, it's complicated. But as I said, Ding didn't want to do that, and he allowed the position just to drift into this drawn position very, very quickly. Nevertheless, Ding, playing black, could be happy with a draw. So scores even after 5 games. Ding playing white. Now this was more complicated. So it was a London system, and Ding played a line which was very forcing, actually. And they reached this complex position, which has actually been seen before. But Gukesh handled it pretty well. And by the time it got to this position, Ding realised that actually this is tough to get anywhere. And Ding decided to offer a repetition of moves like this. It's still possible for Ding to play on. He could have claimed control of the d-file with rook ed1. But he just decided straight out of the opening, can't have been far out of his preparation, okay, I'm just going to offer a draw. But here's a really interesting moment. Gukesh with black, you would think he would be happy to draw this position. But he played on. And this is a tense moment in the game. If you look at this with a computer, it thinks that white is slightly better. Fascinating that Gukesh was happy to play this one on. And it's still a really complex position. And again, Ding didn't make the most of it. He played, for example, this is move 33. He played king c2, and they went into an endgame, but Gukesh didn't have any difficulty in this one, and the game simplified to a draw fairly quickly. But Ding could have played queen g5, and that keeps more tension in the position. And this is tricky. This tests black. But Ding didn't want to do that. And he made it too easy for Gukesh, who actually found his way to a draw pretty easily in this position. Calculated it through very well. And basically at this point, Ding decided to force a draw. Probably wise by that stage. Neither player should play on there. So after 6 games, a draw, but it's clear that these games were following a pattern where Ding wasn't really wanting to keep the tension, whereas Gukesh was wanting to play on. Now, in this game, game 7, Gukesh sprung a surprise, rook e1, so a very mysterious rook move, but basically offering a pawn right in the opening. And Ding again thought for a long time, and white obviously has compensation here. And Ding did not play it very well, so that after, let me see, we get to around about this position. So white has this strong pass pawn. And, well, this was a roller coaster of a game, actually. But with the 2 bishops and that pass pawn on d5, Gukesh definitely had the advantage and was doing extremely well. Both players missed chances, but basically they reached an endgame where Gukesh was better. Ding went wrong. And at this point, Ding is a pawn down, and Gukesh has fantastic chances to win here. But I think again this game revealed nerves on Gukesh's part. He didn't manage to finish the game off. Now, it was brilliant defense from Ding here. In this position, he found this idea with f6, and then this move and f4, and this gave him counterplay, and basically he managed to hold the game. But you feel Gukesh could have done better here. He played an excellent opening to confuse Ding, and he should have finished this game off. So he could have played h4 here. Maybe the simplest move is, a practical move is to exchange off bishop for knight. That knight is annoying. So, for example, after this, rook c5 check, and when the king goes g4, and it's really, that sort of separates that pawn from the rest of, the other pawn on f7 and black's king as well. And white is going to be able to creep forward here, and that looks like a very safe pawn. Should be winning, and if king takes, then again white has a really compact position, and this should be winning for white. But there are other ways to go as well. So I think Ding would have been very relieved to hold that, and he showed grit and determination to hold the draw. But I think Gukesh came very close and really should have polished that one off, because he achieved everything he could from a very interesting opening novelty that clearly confused Ding. Okay, so that was another draw. So we went into game 8, and this was a mad game. So it seems to be Gukesh's idea to, play very complex positions to confuse Ding, and Ding was consuming a lot of time. So this is an unusual opening, but Gukesh had a very good position out of this opening, establishing a nice pawn center. But Ding managed to fight back, and again, this was quite a pattern in these games, that often Gukesh would spring an opening surprise. Ding would have to invest a lot of time. Obviously, he wasn't comfortable, but somehow found his feet. At a certain point, Gukesh took the initiative. Ding didn't play it well, and it was a roller coaster of a game, actually. And at this point, it's looking tremendous for black, with these pawns rolling down the board. But again, gritty defense from Ding, and he played this move, bishop b2, and Gukesh went wrong in this very complex position. And in fact, when it got to here, Ding even missed a chance to win. He played knight d4, and the knight came in on c6, and this is just a complex position. White is the exchange up, but actually Gukesh has excellent compensation. But Ding could have played knight e1, and that is a much stronger move. I should say that if you want to check out my earlier videos, of course I went through every single game in a little bit more depth, and I looked at knight e1 there, and this is very, very difficult for black. These bishops and the pin on the c-file, it's really unpleasant, and probably winning for white. But Ding couldn't finish things off, and then even here where white is, according to the computer, white is better, but this is still very, very difficult. And again, we had this thing of Ding obviously wasn't comfortable in these very complicated positions and offered a repetition. And again, Gukesh decided to play on. So this shows fantastic spirit from the 18-year-old. He's obviously finding his feet in this match. But in fact, Ding played well enough to hold this one. Gukesh was trying to maintain a complicated position, but Ding managed to simplify. And again, this one ended in a draw. But I think, these games were very interesting. When we see this pattern that Ding obviously didn't quite feel comfortable in these complex positions, but Gukesh was trying to keep the tension and somehow wrong foot Ding. So all even after 8 games. Right, what have we got next? So this was a fairly tame, closed Catalan. Where in these positions black doesn't take on c4. Ding handled this very well actually, and he managed to simplify the position. And at this point, although it looked like Gukesh was making progress, in fact Ding had calculated that this position was absolutely fine, and basically white cannot hang on to this extra pawn, and the players simplified to this endgame. Again, a very interesting moment. Although this looks completely dry, all the pawns on the same side of the board. In fact, Ding, with the knights are often better on just playing on one side of the board. Ding actually had a kind of created a nominal advantage here, because there are 3 isolated pawns for Gukesh, and these are better than, black's pawn structure is better than white's. But again, we found a situation where after this, very quickly, the position petered out, and this is just a draw. Ding did this very quickly, but he could have played this one on. If he played f5, now this leaves white in some doubt. Do you push this pawn? Do you wait with the king? Both moves are probably okay, but black can have some fun here. It could be that you can win one of these pawns. Even then, it's probably still a draw, but it's tricky. And it was just it was, again, we saw evidence that Ding was just happy to halve out. So that was game 9. Also showed that Ding is still a quality player, but it was the spirit that was lacking. So all even after 9 games, 4.5 all.